welcome to the Malika Writes channel. My name is Malika Writes, and today we will be talking about the relationship between Daisy and Tom Buchanan from The Great Gatsby. It's a novelette. I don't think it's big enough to qualify as a novel, but it's a novelette that's written by F. Scott Fitzgerald, and it's a book that's regularly studied in schools. It's one of the classics. So I just wanted to touch on something it's not as readily talked about. In the book we have the character, obviously, the Great Gatsby, J. Gatsby, who the story is about. We have Nick Carraway, who is the narrator, and then we have his cousin Daisy Buchanan, who is married to Tom Buchanan. Now the story sort of focuses on these four the most and their relationship with each other. The story has themes of class, so we have J. Gatsby, who is a sort of new money person who's just kind of made his money during the 1920s, and then we have Tom Buchanan, who comes from an old money family, and Daisy, obviously, who also comes from an old money family, and Nick, who is her cousin but not as rich, but he does come from the Midwest, so he lived a fairly comfortable life. So when we talk about the relationships in the book, people tend to focus on the relationship between J. Gatsby and Daisy Buchanan. Now their relationship starts off when they were quite young, before Jay went to the war, and they were in love with each other. Well, we'll debate whether that was love or infatuation, but they were in love with each other, and Jay went to the war, he didn't come back, and Daisy got married to a richer person, Tom. So after that whole scenario happened, Jay gets into bootlegging, which was the illegal shipping and distributing of alcohol during the 1920s. Alcohol had been banned. I think it was the 8th Amendment that was revoked, thankfully enough, because bootlegging caused quite a bit of trouble. And Jay got rich off that, and he threw these extravagant parties and bought this really massive house in order to attract Daisy back to him, as she lived across the dock. Really strategically bought that house to attract this woman back to him. So since then, Daisy has, obviously gotten married and had a child, and she is kind of moving around aimlessly with Tom, going from sort of one country club to the next, and just going from one place rather carelessly with her husband. So when people study the book, as I've said before, the focus is on Jay and Daisy, because the big romance of the book is between the two of them. However, I wanted to talk today about the relationship between Daisy and Tom Buchanan, since they are, the married couple in this story, and they give us a sort of view into, I wouldn't say they give us a view into a working marriage, but they give us a view into what a marriage between two people of a high social class at the time may have been like. So the two kind of go around the place together rather aimlessly. They're not really doing anything. They have enough money to have no purpose in life, and that doesn't affect them in any way. And when we see Daisy, I think in order to understand this dynamic and their relationship, we have to look at the character of Daisy, not as we would like to see her through the eyes of Nick and through the eyes of J. Gatsby, but as she is described. Yes, she is quite charming, she is made to seem rather angelic, however, she is careless, and that is emphasized in the book, and we see it. We have a really good example of how careless and selfish she is when she interacts with her daughter. We rarely hear about this child in the novel, and to be honest, whenever we see Daisy interact with this child, it's very tense. It's not nurturing at all. There's something very disturbing there. Not disturbing as in she's outrightly abusing the child, even though neglect is abuse. So she is, yes, technically abusing her daughter. She is neglecting her daughter in favour for herself. She doesn't think about anyone but herself, which in some ways makes her a perfect match for her husband, Tom Buchanan. Tom is the other half of the equation, and he is ruthless, and he will get his way or he will use violence. He hits his mistress. We get to see this display of violence by Tom when he hits his mistress. He is cheating on Daisy, and she is aware of it. So we see this very toxic relationship, this very loveless sort of relationship. And there are some people who think that Daisy should have gone with Jay Gatsby. However, I do think that when we look at the personalities of Daisy and Tom, we see why they gravitate toward each other. We see why they can't possibly leave each other. It's not that the argument that Daisy cannot leave Tom because of his immense wealth and the fact that she has no autonomy is actually refuted by a secondary character called Jordan. Now, Jordan is a female character, and she is regularly around the Buchanans. Nick actually meets her when she is with the Buchanans, and Nick enters a relationship with her. But she is a sort of self-made woman. I don't think she would classify necessarily as a flapper, which were the sort of loose women of the time. But she is a self-made woman. She does kind of make her own money. And she shows that there is an opportunity for women to actually fend for themselves in this environment. And then we have a nice contrast between Daisy and Jordan. It's very important, especially for exam students, not to get caught into the trap of continuously saying that Daisy is some helpless woman who cannot fend for herself and must think of her daughter, because even of her own relation, she does not think of her daughter. Daisy is not some woman trapped in a unfavorable conditions. She is a woman who has decided to be in that situation, and she is also a woman who is careless. She is actually perfectly matched for her husband. When we read the text without bias, reading the text for how it was meant to be read, we see that Daisy and Tom are just two sides of the same coin. They are described almost parallel to each other. When we look at the physical description of Daisy and the physical description of Tom, we see that they are both very attractive. They're described in a very alluring way. We see the pull that other people have, that they have on other people. But there is something very rotten about them. There's something underlining that isn't quite right. We see Daisy's sort of obsession with material. When she meets with Gatsby again and they kind of go to his house, she is fascinated and brought to tears by the beauty of Gatsby's shirts, not by the sheer emotion of being reunited with a lover. In fact, their opportunity to reunite is awkward. When they come together for the first time in years, it's very awkward, it's very uncomfortable, and we sort of see that this is not a good match. We see, unfortunately, that all of Gatsby's dreams are sort of dashed, and I think this is something that exam students should pay close attention to. This is not a positive love story. This is a tragedy. And we see that it was a tragedy from the very beginning, because this was based on falsehoods. From the very beginning, Daisy and Jay's relationship was built on falsehoods, whereas, ironically, Daisy and Tom's relationship seems to have a lot of truth in it. They don't love each other in the sense that they respect and care for each other, but they are bound together not just by their commitment of marriage and by their daughter, but by their very similar behaviors and characters. They are, as I've said, two sides of the same coin. So I think it's very important when looking at these characters, especially if you're doing exams, to look at them through this light, because then we see why this story is a tragedy. The sort of medium that the story is being told in is of tragedy. So from the very beginning, we see the seeds of this coming in, and that's why everything moves in accordance to the traditional form of a tragedy. So that's what I wanted to kind of say for today. I really did want to target this more at people who are studying the book. I think it's important for anyone reading the book to have this view of the characters and to have this view of Daisy and Tom's relationship. But I think for students, Tom and Daisy's relationship is talked about really through kind of the lens of Daisy as this oppressed woman who has no control over her situation, and Gatsby sort of comes in as a savior and gives her a window of opportunity, but she's so scared that she can't take it. No, Daisy knows perfectly well what she's doing. We see that she has some control over herself, and she actually knows the effect that she has on people. She is very aware of her privilege, and she is very aware of her sort of status and what it affords her. And we see that the way she treats her daughter is the way she treats other people. It's the way she treats Gatsby. When she sees that he cannot give her the same sort of life, the same sort of status as Tom, she neglects him. She leaves him to go back to her husband. And Tom, again, when his mistress dies, he's not really concerned for the mistress. He's more, concerned with himself, and also with getting Gatsby back for stealing his wife. So when we look at them this way, I think it's really a good thing to view them in that way, because then we see the book for what it is. Oftentimes when we're reading, we can take other sort of interpretations that were not originally from the book but were imposed on the book to look at how the characters behave, and we sort of read things through that lens. But I think stripping back from all those interpretations and looking at the description of the characters and looking at how they were presented to us in the book, solely from the book, is a good way to go off. And I think that the book offers enough evidence that we should look at Daisy and Tom's relationship through this lens. So that's all I'm going to say on the topic. I hope that this was helpful. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I will see you on Tuesday for our lighter sort of tea time topics. Thank you very much for watching, and this has been the Malika Writes channel.